I never truly knew who my husband was until it was too late. The words of Maria Victoria Henao, the woman who spent 17 years alongside the most wanted man in Colombia, resonate with a disturbing truth. While the world knew Pablo Escobar as the leader of the Medellin cartel, she lived in a parallel reality built on carefully crafted lies, hidden truths, and constant manipulation. What the public never knew is that behind every decision made by the kingpin, there was a dark side that directly affected his family. Today, decades after his death, his wife finally reveals the secrets she kept locked away for years. Secrets that completely change our understanding of who Pablo Escobar really was. The forbidden truth emerging from these confessions not only rewrites the story of the man, but also exposes the devastating reality of living in the shadow of the most notorious criminal empire of the 20th century. How can someone be married to one of the most notorious criminals in history and claim she was unaware of the true nature of his business? This is the central contradiction that has followed Maria Victoria Henao for decades. Unlike other wives of criminal organization leaders who often held key roles within the operations, Maria Victoria insists she was kept entirely on the margins of her husband's empire. While Emma Coronel managed El Chapo's operations during his imprisonment, and Rosalinda Gonzalez Valencia served as the financial head of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, Maria Victoria Henao seemingly lived inside a carefully constructed bubble of ignorance. Was it truly possible that the wife of the man who controlled 80% of the global trade in illegal substances had no idea where his immense fortune came from? The answer to this question reveals a pattern of psychological manipulation that began when she was barely a teenager. Maria was only 13 years old when she met Pablo Escobar, a man 11 years older than her. What started as a forbidden romance quickly evolved into a relationship defined by control and secrecy, one that would shape the rest of her life. He built two completely separate worlds, Maria confessed years later. There was the family Pablo, loving and attentive, and there was the business Pablo, a man I never truly came to know. This duality raises unsettling questions. To what extent was Maria a victim of an elaborate deception? Or was this supposed ignorance a convenient narrative to protect herself and her children? What did she really know about her husband's activities? Maria's testimony reveals a calculated pattern of behavior by Escobar. He deliberately compartmentalized his life, keeping his family isolated from his criminal operations. This strategy not only protected his business, but also allowed him to maintain a facade of normalcy at home. He never talked about business at home, Maria recalls. When I asked where the money came from, he always had prepared answers about real estate investments and legitimate businesses. But there were signs that were impossible to ignore. The constant bodyguards, the extravagant properties, the sudden escapes in the middle of the night. Maria lived in a golden cage, surrounded by luxury but also by constant danger. What is most disturbing is that this dynamic of secrecy and control began long before Escobar became the infamous leader of the Medellin cartel. The early years of their relationship, when Maria was just a teenager, established a pattern of manipulation that would persist throughout their marriage. But there is more to this story. Something Maria kept silent for decades and only revealed years after Escobar's death. A secret that would forever change our understanding of their relationship and of the man behind the myth. A secret that began when she was just 14 years old, marking the start of a cycle of control, manipulation, and fear that would last her entire life. To fully understand the relationship between Pablo Escobar and Maria Victoria Henao, we must go back to Colombia in the 1970s, specifically to Envigado, a municipality near Medellin. It was a time of deep social inequality where opportunities for economic advancement were limited, especially for those from humble backgrounds like Escobar's. Pablo Escobar was born in 1949 in Rio Negro, Colombia, into a family with very limited resources. His father was a small-scale farmer, and his mother a school teacher. Despite their poverty, his parents tried to provide him with an education, but Escobar dropped out of school at 17, marking the beginning of his criminal path. He started with minor offenses, selling illegal cigarettes, forged lottery tickets, and eventually stealing vehicles. By the mid-1970s, Escobar was already involved in more serious activities, working for other smugglers and participating in kidnappings for ransom. In 1976, he founded what would become the Medellin Cartel, establishing smuggling routes from Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador into the United States. That same year, he met Maria Victoria Henao, a young girl from a traditional Catholic family who was only 13 years old when she first locked eyes with Pablo, who was already 24. They lived near each other in Envigado, and according to Maria, Escobar was an influential figure in the community. People went to him when they needed help, Maria recalls. He was like a community leader, always willing to solve problems. The Henao family, especially Maria's mother, strongly opposed the relationship from the beginning, not only because of the age difference, but also because of Escobar's reputation and humble origins. Although not wealthy, the Henao family maintained a certain social standing they felt was threatened by Pablo's presence. This forced the young couple to maintain a secret and closely monitored relationship. Maria, in her own words, was captivated by Escobar's charisma and magnetic personality. He was her first love, her first kiss at 13, and eventually her first intimate experience at 14. This last event marks one of the most disturbing aspects of their early relationship. Maria describes this first experience as forced and involuntary. Raised in a traditional Catholic household, she lacked any education about intimacy and was completely vulnerable. What followed was even more traumatic. A teenage pregnancy that, according to Maria, Escobar pressured her to end. "He told me never to tell anyone about it," Maria revealed decades later, "and I kept that promise for many years." Despite these traumatic events, Maria remained devoted to Pablo. At 15, against her parents' wishes, the couple ran away to seek the approval of Maria's grandmother. Eventually, they married, with Maria still a teenager and unaware of the true scope of her new husband's activities. The social context of the time made these dynamics easier to normalize. In 1970s Colombia, marriages involving very young women were not uncommon, especially in traditional environments. Additionally, the dominant patriarchal structure normalized relationships where the man exercised absolute control over family decisions. Maria became a mother before even finishing high school. Her son, Juan Pablo, was born while she was still a teenager. In a scene she herself describes as surreal, both her husband and her son attended her high school graduation. "I became a mother before I became a woman," Maria reflects with a hint of bitterness. This context is crucial to understanding the dynamic established from the very beginning, a deeply unequal relationship where control and manipulation were normalized early on, laying the groundwork for the turbulent years to come, when Escobar's criminal empire would reach its peak. By the late 1970s, while Maria Victoria was trying to adapt to her role as a teenage wife and mother, Pablo Escobar was beginning his meteoric rise in the criminal world. In April 1978, a crucial meeting with several distributors of illegal substances at a rural estate marked a turning point. By the end of that year, the Medellin cartel had managed to transport more than 19,000 kilograms of white powder into the United States, where demand was growing exponentially. Money began to flow at an unimaginable pace. Almost overnight, Escobar went from being a mid-level criminal to becoming one of the richest men in the world. With this new fortune, he acquired an enormous property in Antioquia, Colombia, where he built the legendary Hacienda Nápoles, an extravagant estate featuring a Spanish colonial-style mansion, lush gardens, and artificial lake, a private zoo, and countless amenities for his family. It was like living in a theme park, Maria recalls. There were exotic animals everywhere, swimming pools, racetracks. The children loved it. What is most striking about this period is that, according to Maria's testimony, she remained completely unaware of the true source of this sudden wealth. While Pablo Escobar was becoming the most powerful distributor of illegal substances on the planet, his wife seemingly lived inside a carefully manufactured bubble of ignorance. To the outside world, Pablo was an average businessman, but to me, he was simply my husband, Maria says. I never took part in his business, and he never told me about it. We lived in completely different worlds, and this duality became the defining characteristic of their marriage. During the week, Escobar played the role of a hard-working, devoted family man. On weekends, he disappeared to become the leader of one of the most lethal criminal organizations in the world. In the early 1980s, driven by his growing economic power, Escobar decided to enter politics. This had been his dream since he was young, but his humble origins and lack of formal education had kept him away from that world. Now, with nearly unlimited resources, nothing seemed impossible. In 1982, he was elected as an alternate member of Colombia's House of Representatives for the Liberal Party. This position granted him parliamentary immunity and the right to a diplomatic passport under Colombian law. For Maria, this was a period of pride and hope. I believed he was finally leaving behind any shady business to dedicate himself to serving the community, she recalls. I was so proud of him, of seeing how he helped those in need. Indeed, Escobar invested millions in philanthropic projects. He rebuilt impoverished neighborhoods in Medellin, constructed housing, schools, soccer fields, and numerous community initiatives. He won the hearts of many and became a popular figure due to his charitable work. What Maria did not know was that this philanthropy served a strategic purpose: to clean up his public image and build a base of popular support that could shield him from authorities. While he built schools with one hand, with the other he ordered eliminations and controlled illegal substance distribution routes. Escobar's brief political idyll came to an end when Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, the new Minister of Justice, began investigating his activities. Lara Bonilla had been tracking Escobar since his arrest in 1976 for possession of illegal substances, a charge he had escaped through bribery. The silver or lead tactic, bribe or death, had worked for Escobar for years. Those who cooperated received generous financial rewards. Those who refused were taken out. But Lara Bonilla proved to be incorruptible. When the minister publicly exposed Escobar's criminal background, Escobar was forced to resign from Congress. 3 months later, in April 1984, Lara Bonilla's life was taken by gunmen sent by Escobar. For Maria, this period marked the beginning of a downward spiral that would transform her life forever. She was pregnant with her daughter Manuela when they were forced to flee abruptly to Panama. Pablo came home and told me we had to leave immediately, she recalls. He gave me no explanation, only said it was dangerous to stay in Colombia. I packed a few things for the children and we left that same night. This would be the first of many sudden escapes. From that moment on, Maria and her children's lives became a constant game of hiding. Revelations about her husband's activities began to surface, but Maria continued to obey unquestioningly, without asking questions. Our relationship was built on lies and manipulation from the start, Maria reflects. That's why it continued that way throughout our marriage. I focused only on raising and protecting my children, trying to maintain some appearance of normalcy amid the chaos. One of the most painful moments for Maria was being forced to separate from her newborn daughter, Manuela. For security reasons, the baby was sent to live with relatives while Maria and Juan Pablo stayed with Escobar. It was like a part of me was ripped away, she recalls. Months passed before I could hold my daughter again. The dangers were constant and unpredictable. On January 13, 1988, A vehicle loaded with explosives was sent to the neighborhood where Maria and her children were staying, causing numerous deaths and injuries. The impact was so severe that Manuela, still a very young child, nearly lost her hearing. "We lived in constant fear," Maria explains. "We never knew when or where the next attack might happen." Pablo had many enemies, rival organizations, the government, and foreign agencies. The only period of relative calm came in 1991, when Escobar negotiated his surrender to Colombian authorities under extraordinarily favorable conditions. He reached an agreement to avoid extradition to the United States, reduce his sentence to 5 years, and, most astonishingly, build his own prison. La Catedral, as the facility was known, was more like a luxury resort than a penitentiary. Escobar spent millions ensuring it had every imaginable comfort. "During that time, we could visit him regularly," Maria recalls. "The children were happy to see their father without having to hide or run. For a moment, I believed we might have a normal life once he served his sentence." That illusion quickly vanished in July 1992 when Escobar escaped from La Catedral after learning the government planned to transfer him to a conventional prison. His escape triggered an intense manhunt involving hundreds of soldiers, police officers, and foreign agents. For Maria and her children, the most dangerous period of their lives began. While Escobar spent all his time evading authorities, his family faced attacks from every direction. At a critical moment, the CIA took Maria and her children into custody, hoping this would pressure Escobar to surrender. "We became pawns in a deadly chess game," Maria reflects, "used as bargaining tools by every side." The relationship between Pablo Escobar and Maria Victoria Henao reveals a psychological complexity that goes beyond simplistic narratives about the partners of criminal leaders. To truly understand this dynamic, we must examine the patterns of control, manipulation, and codependence that defined their 17-year marriage. From the beginning, the relationship was marked by a significant imbalance of power. When Maria met Escobar, she was a 13-year-old girl from a traditional conservative family. Pablo, 11 years older, was already an experienced man with an emerging criminal career. This gap in age and experience immediately established a dynamic in which Escobar assumed the role of mentor and authority figure rather than an equal partner. "He decided everything," Maria recalls. "From what we ate to where we lived, I was too young to question anything." Psychologists who study similar relationships identify this as a classic pattern of grooming, where an adult gradually builds trust with a minor in order to later exert control. Maria's teenage pregnancy and the pressure to end it reinforced this control, creating a shared secret that forged a bond of forced complicity. The compartmentalization strategy Escobar used in his professional life extended into his marriage. He deliberately kept Maria isolated from his criminal activities, creating what psychologists call plausible ignorance. This tactic not only protected his operations but also allowed him to maintain a space where he could escape his criminal identity. "For him, we were his sanctuary," Maria explains. With his family, he could pretend to be just Pablo, not the Pablo Escobar the world feared. This duality fulfilled deep psychological needs for Escobar. On one hand, his criminal life provided power, wealth, and recognition. On the other, his family offered normalcy, genuine affection, and the illusion of a respectable life. Maria and their children represented the possibility of redemption, a reminder that some humanity still existed within him. For Maria, denial became a psychological survival mechanism. Fully accepting the true nature of her husband's activities would have created an unbearable moral conflict, especially given her traditional Catholic upbringing. It was easier to accept Escobar's surface-level explanations about legitimate businesses and philanthropy. "Part of me probably knew the truth," Maria admits, but acknowledging it would have meant facing impossible decisions. "Leave him and put my children at risk?" Report him? I had no real options. This form of self-deception, known in psychology as willful blindness, allowed Maria to maintain a sense of moral integrity while continuing to benefit from the luxurious lifestyle provided by Escobar's criminal activities. The constant danger and life on the run also created what experts call trauma bonding, where shared experiences of extreme stress form intense emotional ties. Each time they survived a dangerous situation together, the bond between them grew stronger, making it even harder for Maria to consider leaving. Their children, Juan Pablo and Manuela, became both victims of this dysfunctional dynamic and reasons to maintain it. Maria justified staying with Escobar as a sacrifice for her children's well-being, believing they needed their father despite everything. "My children were my absolute priority," Maria insists. "Everything I did to protect them." However, this justification overlooked the psychological harm caused by growing up in an environment of violence, secrecy, and constant danger. Juan Pablo, in particular, developed a complex relationship with his father's legacy, oscillating between admiration, rejection, and guilt by association. The unwavering loyalty Maria showed toward Escobar, even after learning the true nature of his activities, reflects a phenomenon similar to Stockholm Syndrome, where victims develop emotional bonds with their captors as a psychological survival strategy. This complex psychological dynamic explains why, decades after Escobar's death, Maria can simultaneously say she suffered deeply because of her husband's actions and that she never regretted falling in love with him. The final phone call between Pablo Escobar and Maria Victoria Henao marked the beginning of the end. It was December 1993, and Escobar had been a fugitive for more than a year following his escape from La Catedral. The largest manhunt in Colombian history was reaching its climax. Maria and her children had been placed under protective custody by authorities hoping to use the family as bait to capture the kingpin. Desperate to speak with them, Escobar made the fatal mistake of staying on the phone too long. "He told me he was safe, that he was doing everything for us," Maria recalls, her voice breaking. "I was terrified, but I still hoped to see him again." What Maria did not know was that the call was being traced by a sophisticated surveillance team. Colombian authorities, working in collaboration with U.S. agencies, had deployed advanced technology to locate Escobar. The call lasted long enough to triangulate his position in a middle-class neighborhood in Medellin. The following day, December 2nd, 1993, a search unit surrounded the building where Escobar was hiding. What followed was an intense exchange of gunfire that ended with the Medellin cartel leader's life being taken. Images of his lifeless body on the rooftop spread around the world, marking the end of an era in Colombia's criminal history. For Maria, the news came as a devastating blow. Despite everything she had suffered because of her husband, she had never truly imagined a future without him. "When they told me he had died, it felt like the world stopped," she recalls. "Not out of romantic love at that point, but because I knew our lives were about to become even more dangerous." Her instinct was right. Escobar's death unleashed a storm of chaos for his family. Maria had no time to process her grief. She immediately faced threats from all sides. Escobar's enemies, both rival criminal organizations and government forces, now saw the family as easy targets for revenge. Most surprising of all was that Maria, a woman who supposedly had nothing to do with her husband's criminal business, was forced to negotiate directly with leaders of other criminal organizations to ensure her survival. "I had to sit across from men who had been Pablo's sworn enemies," Maria reveals. "I begged for our lives and had to pay them millions of dollars in exchange for our safety." This raises disturbing questions about how much Maria really knew about her husband's finances and connections. How could a woman supposedly disconnected from illegal operations access millions to negotiate with criminal organizations? Had she truly been as isolated as she always claimed? Escobar's funeral was a chaotic event that reflected Colombia's complex relationship with him. More than 25,000 people gathered at the funeral home and burial site to say goodbye to the Medellin cartel leader. While some wept uncontrollably, others celebrated his death as the end of an era of terror. For Maria and her children, the real nightmare was just beginning. After securing a fragile agreement with Escobar's former rivals, Maria made the most drastic decision of her life: to completely erase her identity and that of her children. "I understood that as long as we were Escobars, we would never be safe," she explains. The last name was a death sentence. Maria Victoria Henao legally changed her name to Maria Isabel Santos Caballero. Her son, Juan Pablo Escobar, became Sebastián Marroquín. Even young Manuela received a new identity. Under these new names, the family fled Colombia and sought asylum in Argentina. The process of reinvention was brutal. Overnight, they went from living in palaces to occupying small apartments. Escobar's fortune, once estimated in the billions, had largely vanished, confiscated by governments or stolen by former associates. "We had to learn how to live like normal people," Maria recalls. "I had never cooked, cleaned, or gone grocery shopping. We always had staff who did everything for us." This forced transition revealed another uncomfortable truth. For years, Maria had enjoyed the benefits of Escobar's criminal empire while supposedly ignoring its origins. Now, faced with life without those privileges, she had to confront her own passive complicity. For Juan Pablo, now Sebastian, the process was even more complex. As Pablo Escobar's son, many expected him to follow in his father's footsteps. Instead, he chose a radically different path, dedicating himself to architecture and eventually becoming an advocate for peace and reconciliation. The forbidden truth that emerges from Maria's confessions is not simply a list of crimes or hidden secrets. It is the revelation of how power, manipulation, and fear can distort love into a psychological prison. It is the story of a girl who became a woman under the shadow of a man who built an empire of destruction while maintaining the illusion of being a devoted husband and father. For Maria and her children, the healing process continues. Juan Pablo, now Sebastián Marroquín, has dedicated his life to apologizing to his father's victims and promoting peace. Manuela, the youngest, has chosen a completely private life, trying to escape the weight of her family's legacy.